The courtroom was packed that morning. Judge Eleanor Wainwright, a seasoned white judge known for her stern demeanor, entered with her usual air of authority. The room fell silent as she took her seat. Across from her stood Sarah Jackson, a young black woman in her late 20s, with a determined look in her eyes. Sarah was a single mother, a community activist, and an aspiring entrepreneur. She was being sued by a wealthy businessman, Harold Cunningham, for alleged defamation and damages worth $100,000. Harold, an older white man dressed in a tailored suit, smirked as his attorney presented the case. "Your Honor," Harold's lawyer began, "Ms. Jackson has repeatedly slandered my client on social media, accusing him of discriminatory practices in his company. These accusations are baseless and have caused significant harm to Mr. Cunningham's reputation and business." Sarah, representing herself, stood tall. "Your Honor, I only spoke the truth. I have proof that Mr. Cunningham's company has been systematically denying promotions to employees of color. This isn't defamation, it's accountability." The evidence and cross-examination. Judge Wainwright leaned forward. "Ms. Jackson, if you claim to have evidence, present it now." Sarah opened a folder and handed several documents to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. "These are testimonies from former employees," Sarah explained. "They detail a pattern of discrimination in promotions and pay raises. Additionally, I have screenshots of internal emails where executives explicitly discussed keeping certain positions reserved." Harold's lawyer interjected, "These so-called testimonies are unverifiable, Your Honor. They come from disgruntled ex-employees who have axes to grind. This is hearsay at best." Judge Wainwright raised a hand. "Let me review the documents first." She carefully read through the evidence, her expression unreadable. After a pause, she addressed Sarah. "Do you have corroborating evidence or witnesses who can testify to these claims?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I've called 2 former employees who are willing to testify." The first witness, a middle-aged black man named Marcus, stepped forward. "I worked for Mr. Cunningham for 7 years. Despite consistent high performance, I was passed over for promotions in favor of less qualified white colleagues. When I confronted management, they told me I wasn't the right fit for leadership." The second witness, a Latina woman named Maria, added, "I faced the same issues. I was constantly overlooked, and when I brought it up, I was retaliated against and eventually let go." The turning point. As the witnesses testified, murmurs filled the courtroom. Harold's confident demeanor began to waver. Judge Wainwright, however, remained impartial, occasionally jotting down notes. When it was Harold's turn to speak, he dismissed the allegations. "Your Honor, these claims are ridiculous. My company has always upheld the highest standards of equality and professionalism." Judge Wainwright asked pointedly, "If that's true, why do these testimonies paint a consistent picture of bias? Do you have documentation or performance reviews to refute these claims?" Harold hesitated. His lawyer scrambled to explain, "Your Honor, while we don't have those records readily available, the burden of proof lies with Ms. Jackson." "Indeed it does," Judge Wainwright replied, "but what I've seen so far raises serious concerns." The verdict. After days of testimony and deliberation, Judge Wainwright prepared to deliver her ruling. "Ms. Jackson," she began, "you took a bold stand in speaking out against what you believe to be systemic injustice. However, this court must also consider the legal standards for defamation." She paused, glancing at Harold. "Mr. Cunningham, while you claim to have suffered harm to your reputation, you have failed to provide concrete evidence to refute these allegations. Furthermore, the testimonies and documents presented by Ms. Jackson suggest that there may indeed be merit to her claims. The courtroom held its breath. Therefore, the judge continued, I rule that the defamation claim against Ms. Jackson is unfounded and dismiss the case. However, I also advise Ms. Jackson to ensure that any future statements are fully supported by evidence to avoid similar lawsuits. Harold's face turned red with anger, while Sarah let out a sigh of relief. As the court began to disperse, Judge Wainwright called Sarah back. Ms. Jackson, your courage is admirable, but the fight for justice requires precision. Don't stop advocating for what's right, but remember that every claim must be airtight. Sarah nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll keep that in mind. Epilogue. The case made headlines, sparking debates about corporate accountability and the courage required to stand up against powerful figures. Sarah's story inspired others to share their experiences, leading to an investigation into Harold's company. Judge Wainwright, despite criticism from some quarters, stood by her decision. For her, justice was not about appearances but about finding the truth, even when it was buried beneath layers of power and privilege.